everyone, and welcome to the Young Turks Power Panel. Thank you for joining us on this. Just such an awesome, smooth intro to the year. Very excited for what it bodes going forward. But anyway, very glad to be joined on this power panel by two individuals who I could not pick two better people to be discussing the events this week with. The first, joining me, I believe for the first time on the Young Turks, but she's been my co-host on the Damage Report multiple times. Viviana Vigil, host and producer. Welcome to the show.
Reporting for duty, sir.
Great to have you here. And comedian Alonzo Bowden joining us once again. Alonzo, how you doing?
I'm good, John. Hello, Viviana. Nice to join you guys.
Yeah, so glad to have you both here. Thank you to everybody who's viewing wherever you're viewing from. Thank you for joining us. This is going to be a big one. We're talking about some weighty stuff. We're in, just a couple days out from the insurrection in DC, wondering what's going to happen going forward. So we're going to break down a bunch of different potential paths for that. We've also got a little bit more information about some of those who are being tracked down and arrested. We've got a little bit more information about Biden's cabinet, so a lot that we're going to be discussing. And during our social breaks, we'll be responding to your tweets and comments and super chats and things like that, and member comments as well. So feel free to send those in. That said, Viviana, Alonzo, you ready to do this thing?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Let's talk about some news. Pretty much everybody agrees that something has to be done about Donald Trump, but what? What can they actually do in time? I mean, he's only gonna be president for a little bit less than 2 weeks. So there are a few different theories, a few different potential paths forward. We're gonna break them down, starting with the one that's getting the most time and attention spent on it, which is impeachment. Virtually immediately after the events of Wednesday, multiple representatives and senators were pushing for it. We now know, according to Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that Congress will be introducing articles of impeachment on Monday. She says, yesterday our squad urged House leadership to move quickly to impeach this president. Unfortunately, our country does not have the luxury of time. Well, it apparently has the luxury of at least a little bit of time, because although Representative Ocasio-Cortez, as well as many others, would have probably been perfectly happy to start moving on this Thursday or today, House leadership is not going to do that. And so we've got several days until this actually happens. But we do know, at the very least, that the latest draft of the impeachment resolution includes just one article of impeachment for incitement of insurrection. And the full draft is available out there if you do want to watch it. But so far, they're apparently gonna be moving on this on Monday. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's obviously too late. I don't know if it's a good idea because it calls attention to the failed impeachment last year, when it should have been done. You're basically saying, look, we screwed it up and we allowed him to stay. And a lot of Republicans are saying, I had no idea he was that bad, which I don't know what planet they've been on. But now do you call attention to the fact like, oh, we're gonna impeach him with well over a week to go? We're badasses, right? So what is this? So that the next election cycle, they can say they voted for impeachment or whatever. It's theater. And it's ridiculous. Unfortunately, it works. People fall for this crap.
I completely agree.
You want to jump in?
I completely agree with Alonzo. It's a day late and a dollar short. It's largely symbolic, and sadly, it's just another example of the disgusting display of white privilege that we've seen this week. And frankly, the whole Trump administration, the whole 4 years that he's been in office, where he's going to be guilty of something and not be held accountable for it. I understand that we should make a stand and say this is wrong. I know Bernie Sanders tweeted that as well, that this is something that's on precedent, but we don't have the time to do it. We barely had the time to do it when we had the time. And now it's a day late and a dollar short. It's going to amount to nothing. It's political theater, and like Alonzo said, completely right. It works, and a lot of rats are jumping ship right now, and this is a good time for them to get on the right bandwagon.
Yeah, I think I might disagree in part with you. I certainly agree that some people, like fleeing the administration the last couple of weeks, are doing it to save themselves. So let me see if I can potentially sway with a couple of the arguments that I've heard about why they should do this beyond just God only knows what he could do in the next week and a half. But one argument is that in theory, there have effectively been no permanent legal consequences for literally anything that Donald Trump has done. And by the way, many people are saying this sets the precedent that a president can get away with breaking the law. I've said for a long time, no, it continues the precedent that presidents can get away with breaking the law.
Absolutely.
They've always been able to do that, but they can still do that. So arguably impeaching and convicting him now would at least send a message to a future, potential authoritarian leader, whether it's a Cruz or a Hawley or whoever, to say there could be consequences. The other argument being that in theory, were he to be impeached and convicted under the Constitution, if you're convicted as a result of impeachment, you can't hold future federal office. So that would, in theory, stop Trump from running in the future. Those are two of the arguments I hear. What do you think about either or both of those?
I like the idea that he can't. Go ahead, Alonso.
No, you go ahead.
I just was saying I like the idea that he wouldn't be able to run again. I know that he does have a lot of ambitions politically, whether it is in office or not. So I like the idea that we'd be able to block him out, but I just don't think it's going to be successful.
Isn't inciting an insurrection a crime? Like beyond impeachment, like wouldn't it be great if they said, we wanted to impeach him, but we were busy arresting him? And I believe once you get that felony on your record, you're probably not going to get to run again. No, this is too lightweight. I mean, this guy incited a riot where people were killed, so we're going to fire you from your job. That's the penalty. No, right. Go listen. You swing for the fences. You know what I mean? Like charge him with the worst crime you can, because we know how this works with politicians, especially with outgoing presidents. They're never held responsible or accountable for what they did, right? It always just goes away. So charge him with the most you can. Charge him with a crime. I believe if you start a riot and someone gets killed, you have broken the law. That's the way I understand. Now, mind
you forget the caveat though, Alonso. That's only true if you're not rich and have political friends that you can just grease the wheel and get yourself off that court case real easy. So it just depends on who yells fire.
No, well, I fully agree. There's a difference between being arrested and being convicted. No, you're not going to convict him for this, but just to arrest him for this, I think would be. It would look better than this impeachment routine.
Well, I'm gonna jump ahead because we're talking about potential legal consequences. That is one thing that at least is being talked about. I personally think that I'm gonna. This is a spoiler alert for all of these. I don't think they're gonna do any of them. Honestly, maybe they'll impeach him again, but I don't even think he'd get convicted if he was impeached. But supposedly, the Justice Department said yesterday that it would not rule out pursuing charges against Trump for his possible role a day earlier in encouraging a mob of his supporters to march in the Capitol. So supposedly they are thinking about this. Conceivably, it becomes easier once he's not president anymore, so they don't have to worry about the Office of Legal Counsel memos from the 70s that supposedly protect the president from being charged with anything. So that is a possibility. That seems like more of what you're both leaning towards. How likely do you think that is to happen?
I think it's highly unlikely. I just don't think it's going to be successful. We don't have enough time as it is. We don't have enough backbone in the GOP. I mean, we're lacking a lot of main things here that we need to do to hold this guy accountable. I mean, I don't even know if we had any time to try to convict him for attempting to steal the election himself with the call with the Georgia Secretary of State. I mean, we haven't even processed that. Like that just happened like 3 minutes ago. We're already on to insurrection at the Capitol.
I love that you brought that up, Viviana, because that's been true of his entire administration. The next scandal or the next crime happens so fast, you forget the prior one. Now, John, as to what you're saying about the Department of Justice charging him, I happen to be in my office in my house, and I'm lucky to have 2 big windows here, and I've been looking outside. I haven't seen a pig fly by. I haven't seen any pigs fly, so I'm gonna go with no. No. You would love it. My hope is once he leaves, New York, man, New York, that Southern District, they are gonna go after him. I'm like, no, just let him out, because then you can't stop them. And New York prosecutors love going after Trump, even if they don't put him in jail and just take money from him. That's something because it hurts him. It's a loss. But as far as federal, the new Attorney General Merrick Garland or whatever going after him, I seriously doubt it. I think most of those protesters who stormed the Capitol are going to get away with it because we have an incredibly short memory, And in another month, there'll be something else, and they're not going to charge them. They may get a few of them charged, but under Trump's executive order, aren't they all supposed to get 10 years in prison
10 years.
for damaging a federal building?
That's what they wanted. That is certainly possible. I mean, I would argue that by the 19th, when those same insane people are once again at the Capitol, we'll probably have moved on from this. But yeah, look, I know in theory, once he leaves the presidency, he's going to be open to all of those potential other angles, including the Southern District. And I think, they will certainly hound him. I think that they're hot to do it. But again, he is protected in the way that Viviana was pointing out. He's an incredibly rich, well-connected individual. So I don't know what's going to happen. I would say that if it were up to me, if it was down to the Southern District gets him on his taxes or something, or he goes to jail for inciting a riot, I think it would be a much stronger signal to future presidents and elected officials to go with the latter. Even though there are so many financial crimes, obviously. I mean, talk about moving on from things. Like when some of his taxes were revealed, it made clear so much that he'd obviously done it was illegal. Nobody even talks about that. So
no one.
Yeah. Now,
what's the latest news? What's the latest news, John, on the DOJ? Because I had heard that they are not going to charge any of the speakers at that rally, I guess we would call it, before the riot.
So we've got updates on a few of those who have actually been charged already. In terms of the speakers, I haven't heard anything about that, but we do have some updates on those who have been arrested coming up a little bit later on the show. Really fast.
Really quick, I want to touch on what you said about him being a rich, white, well-connected guy. When it comes to those financial prosecutions, the other rich guys run away. They're like, no, we don't want you looking at our files. They do not. If you remember with Trump University and with the fake charity foundation, none of those people involved spoke up because they're all crooks, right? We know they're all not paying taxes. I mean, they pay some, but not on the level that average Americans do. So when you go after them for financial crimes, it's funny how you don't see their friends standing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
That's true. And to jump back just a little bit earlier to the director, we sort of alluded to this, but one thing that in theory could contribute to either impeachment or to other consequences against him. This is amazing reporting. Republican senators say they feel a sense of growing regret over not standing up to President Trump sooner, the day after the mob and all that. We should have done more to push back, both against his rhetoric and some of the things he did legislatively. The mistake we made is that we always thought he was going to get better. We thought that once he got the nomination, and then once he got a cabinet, he was going to get better. He was going to get more presidential. And I don't know exactly what happened after that, but if I can ad lib a bit, and that is why, finally, at this late date, I am going to take the bold stand of anonymously saying this to reporters. Still anonymous. That person who's talking about regret is still anonymous. Clearly, you haven't reached the point yet.
No, it wasn't enough to call Mexicans rapists. It wasn't enough to have a Muslim ban. It wasn't enough to take infants from their mother's breast. It wasn't enough to all of his evil rhetoric. But this now at the 15th hour. Now I'm going to take a stand anonymously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an old parable about a snake giving a mouse or something a ride across the river, and then when he gets to the other side, he eats him, and he's like, "Well, you knew I was a snake to begin with, right?" It's something like I'm sure I'm butchering it. I'm doing a George Bush on that story. Remember when that was our problem? That George Bush would mix up parables. Remember that was a big problem. The good old days. Viviana, you're young. You might not even remember this. I don't even know. But no, this is.
I was there.
It's the saying. This is like thoughts and prayers, right? This is the saying. This isn't who we are. I didn't know who he. This is their new fallback. We thought he was going to get better. We didn't know he was bad. Yeah, sure you did. So
yeah,
I think Nat King Cole sings a song about it. A buzzer took a monkey for a ride in the air. Okay, I won't sing it. See, I'm old enough for that song.
The good thing about that parable is that it works no matter what animals you put into it, because they all eat each other at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, a snake's a snake. With all due respect to snakes, because I have to say that I think snakes, and because of Mitch McConnell, turtles, There are innocent reptiles that get lumped in with the worst of humanity. I felt sorry for turtles ever since I first saw McConnell. It's just not right.
Finally, in terms of consequence, this is a more limited one, but I thought this was interesting. This was from earlier this morning. According to AP reporter Mike Balsamo, Pelosi tells Dems that top military official assured her steps are in place to prevent Trump nuclear launch. Although numerous Democratic lawmakers have pushed for legislation that would limit the president's ability to launch a nuclear strike, including by requiring additional officials to sign off on a launch and making the no first use of nuclear weapons an official US policy. So she reassures us that he is not going to nuke, I don't know, some other country, our country, who knows? There's still about 10 or 11 days left, so maybe that's one less thing to worry about.
I think this is dangerous. I think she really, she's not my favorite person. I'm not saying that I would have ripped her placard off of her office and beat down the door and done all that, but she tends to do a lot of political theater, and this is rabble rousing of the left. This is saying, look, it's so dangerous, and it's when we know and she knows that there are a lot of steps in place before he can turn those nukes, and there's still a lot of damage that Trump can do that has nothing to do with nukes. So for her to take that step and claiming that it's to sort of appease everybody and calm everybody down, we need to have him put a lid on him for a lot of reasons. Even just his mouth on Twitter can get the country in trouble. I mean, he's caused a lot of problems globally, a lot of kerfuffles, and we can continue. We can expect to continue to see that in the next week or so.
Yeah, I think this is another one that is too little, too late. I think the day after his inauguration, somebody should have made the call and be like, we're not giving him the real nuclear codes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this is one of those cases where, worst case scenario, you just hope that person who carries the football, right, who carries the codes, is not a Trumper. That's what's sad, that now you actually have to think about that. Like the two women who grabbed the electoral votes and carried them out. Those are the people who save us, right? Not the elected people, but the people who work, who get the work done. So you just hope that whoever's carrying that nuclear football with the nuclear codes is like, well, no, I would never. Actually, we told him the code was 010101, and we just let him hit the number pad. We wouldn't.
Yeah.
The FBI.
What I would do
showing
is
up at your house, wondering how you got the code now. The FBI is knocking at your door, Alonzo. Watch out.
Okay, well, look, those are some of the potential consequences for him, other than the only one that he cares about, which was his temporary suspension on Twitter. That was the only thing that's going to change his behavior. Within like 12 hours of that happening, he had put out a video saying he was going to transfer powers. So maybe we should have started using that tool earlier. Anyway, we are going to talk about some of the other individuals involved in this after a short break. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a few.
We get animated about the news. Yes, we're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty, I care.
Senator Sanders, I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to ask you a policy question.
How dare you? That's the problem, you're the problem. Don't ever attack the Republicans. Where the is the liberal media? No, these are all establishment guys. They love the system as it is. They're all enormously rich off the system that exists.
For us, this system isn't working.
So what this campaign is about is trying to create an economy that works not only for the people on top, but works for all Americans.
We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities, and we're gonna keep it real with them.
It's winter, and it's cold this time of year, isn't it? Well, it might feel chilly, and the wind might bite at your nose. Maybe you want to snuggle up with a hot chocolate, or wrap up warm and wear your biggest coat. But in the grand scheme of things, our earth is too hot, and it's getting even hotter. Our seasons are getting confused. Lots of birds are nesting earlier, and spring flowers are coming out too soon. This is what climate change looks like. It's affecting so many of the things we love, both here in our own backyards and around the world. But we have hope because we know that together we can protect them if we act now and everyone does their bit. So this Christmas, give a gift of love and show the world you care.
How in the world are you going to get the right to vote if you don't already have the right to vote? That's impossible. Reason they tell you things are impossible is because they don't want you to try. It only took 7 years for them to get an amendment to get a right to vote.
Does this result in millions upon millions of Americans losing their coverage? And we've been waiting to find out, and now we know, yes, it will cut millions.
Public education was supposed to be the way to equalize everyone regardless of their socioeconomic status. But if you come from a family that's poor, how are you gonna afford grade school for your kids?
This fight is about fairness and morality. It's about the American values.
You think that black people all across the country, in every city, were all lying when they said the police abuse us and the police kill us when they should? No, of course they weren't lying. Yes, it does happen. Yes, they do get targeted more.
Why are we going to put immigrants in prison for 5 years, which American taxpayers have to pay for, if we're so concerned with immigrants using up our so-called resources?
We're gonna do both. We're gonna fight Trump and we're gonna fight the establishment. It's not that hard. Yes, you can do both at the same time. Go tell them.
ShopTYT.com has new shirts like this one. And you're thinking, Cenk, what is that one? I can't see it other than the black. Yes, so I'll show it to you. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing. Yes! Now, you were practicing social distancing. This is over video. But overall, you get it. ShopTYT.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Friday Power Panel here on the Young Turks with Viviana and Alonso Bowden. Thank you for joining us once again. We got to break down a few of the other people involved in the events of Wednesday, not just Donald Trump. He was enabled by a number of powerful people. Let's turn to those now. Some of the Republican senators who were not only most on board with Donald Trump whipping his base into a frenzy about fake allegations of voter fraud before Wednesday, but those quickest to jump back on the Senate floor after the mob was cleared out to go back to doing what that mob wanted them to do are Senator Cruz and Senator Hawley. And they are now facing calls from multiple elected Democrats for them to resign, including Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who tweeted, "Senator Cruz, you must accept responsibility for how your craven, self-serving actions contributed to the deaths of 4 people yesterday and how you fundraised off this riot. Both you and Senator Hawley must resign. If you do not, the Senate should move for your expulsion." And new Representative Cori Bush said, "Josh Hawley said he was doing this for the people of Missouri. Let me tell you something, Josh. You are supposed to represent St. Louis too, but you do not speak for us. You have blood on your hands, and that's why I'm calling for your removal from Congress." Now, it's mainly so far been representatives. There are a few others, including a few senators, and we'll turn to more of their comments in a second. But what do you think about the effort to try to put a little bit of the attention on some of the Republicans who not only were spreading the same, man, those pictures of Josh Hawley or something, that's a guy with a face. Anyway, but that we're clearly doing and engaging in all of this so that in 2024, they could run and get these same people to support them?
I think he's one. He and Cruz are the crux of this attempted coup. They are the coup. What happened inside the GOP is the most dangerous threat to this country, and within the right as well. I mean, they really are dissolving this party that, at a time where I've never been a fan of the Republican Party, there were these fiscal conservative Republicans that we didn't agree eye to eye, but they weren't off the deep end like it's been. Hawley and Cruz, they need to get out of here. I think this is totally appropriate. I always support AOC in her endeavors, and this is not an exception. I think she's right on the money on this one.
what we need is there has to be a Republican other than Mitt Romney to call these guys out. The problem with AOC doing it is AOC doing that for their followers, for Hawley's followers. That's the greatest endorsement he can get, is that AOC is mad at him. It has to be done by, and like Viviana was talking about, and I have friends and I call them the responsible Republicans, the adult Republicans who are, fiscal and whatever, the old Republican Party. It's gonna take some of them to call out Cruz, to call out Hawley. Any Democrat doing it is an endorsement to their mob. So
here's why I think it doesn't matter though, Alonso, because they didn't win. They didn't get anything done. They were in a ruby red state. They couldn't flip it. That was with Trump's help. That was with people like Hawley backing them. They went over there, they marched to the Capitol. They did nothing. They acted like a bunch of idiots, took some TikToks. They did nothing. So it doesn't really matter if you pander to their fans at this point because they have no power. I mean, that's been proven by this week. I've seen them try to exert themselves and their white supremacy. So I think even though you're right, it's not like this is gonna change anybody who's on the right. AOC coming forward, and we do need support from the GOP to start calling out this insurrection. I just don't think that we need to sway those people. These QAnon supporters are mentally ill. That poor woman who was shot in the chest, she wasn't right in the head.
Well, you're nicer than me saying that poor woman. I can't, I can't.
I feel bad for people with mental illness.
What I'm saying is, to get them expelled from the Senate. I'm not talking, to actually do something, it's gonna take Republicans to call them out. I fully agree with what you're saying as far as trying to convert them or whatever. No, and AOC, God bless her for saying it. It's amazing she's the only one brave enough to say it out loud. And then 3 years from now, someone will anonymously say, I agreed with her. Shut up, So,
but somebody has to say it out loud first, though, Alonso, right?
Right.
About 5 years ago, you couldn't even be talking about white supremacy. You couldn't even be talking about, the things that we're talking about today. So you have to have those people with the bullhorn that people say, oh, she's always talking, she's always doing this. Let her keep screaming out there, because eventually people are gonna come and back her up because there's so many cowards out there. The GOP is filled with cowards. It's disgusting. Trump is the lead coward.
Well, and remember how people treated Rashida Tlaib when she was like the first calling for Trump to be impeached. Now, like over 100 Dems are lining up to get on board with Ilhan Omar and her effort to do it. Yeah, so far I don't see a lot of Republicans who are, like you can have Lisa Murkowski's like Trump's the worst, I guess, but she's not calling for her Republican colleagues in the Senate to step down. You do have people like in Hawley's case, I forget the individual, but one of his supposed mentors who was a huge donor to him and pushed for him to get elected to the Senate is calling for the Senate to censure him. So again, that's not the same as an elected representative. That would be obviously much better. I do want to give credit to a few other, at least Democrats who are doing it. So let's play some tape here of Senator Coons talking about this.
Do you support calls for their resignation, Senators Cruz and Hawley? I'm sorry?
Yes, I think they should resign.
So that was quick. He didn't have much to say about it necessarily, but Joaquin Castro also tweeted that Senators Ted Cruz and Hawley should immediately resign. Is it going to amount to much potential? Perhaps not. What I think it is useful for, at least in the short term, is that I think a lot of people, whether they admit it or not, are thinking, let's just get to January 20th. Let's just get there and then this will be done. We'll be able to move past all this, as if all of those, those people who've been activated in support of Trump and that believe QAnon and all of that are all just gonna go away. Like they may not have Trump anymore, or in fact they might, and Trump might come back in a few years, or they might have someone else. Ted Cruz and Hawley, whether they will actually end up being successful in getting all these QAnon people to support them in anything is an open question. I personally think that both of them are uncharismatic doofuses and they won't be able to replicate what Trump has done. But that's what they're trying to do. And so getting people to understand the threat that they pose early on, like if you're going to stop a threat, you have to at least acknowledge it as the first step. And I think that this is part of that.
I agree.
I think Hawley's gonna end up going the way of Santorum. Where people like, oh wow, no, he is crazy. Oh yeah, we got to get rid of, that, because that's what happened with Santorum, right? He just pointed, and then people finally were like, oh wait, no, he's crazy. Okay, we're done with him. Cruz, I think, is more dangerous because Cruz has been an operative all his life. He knows his way around, and he will, stick around. His hope, obviously, is to run in 2024 with the backing of all this crazy. And I don't know how that's going to play out. But Hawley, I think Hawley's gone too far, and that he's going to, end up with a job on Fox News or
CNN.
What is that?
Ended up
One or something. I don't know.
Yeah, Fox News is going to have a lot of fresh blood. We got Hope Hicks coming in. Caitlin McEnany, whatever her name is, going to go back. We got a lot of, I think we need to let capitalism be their demise. It's already happening with Hawley. He's losing his book deal. He's losing support. He's definitely going to look like a kook. He already looked like a crazy person, giving them the whole, fist pump to this crazed, hopped up, rabble-roused crowd. These guys are the danger. These are the politicians that are the swamp. We need to get them out. And I do think people are going to start thinking they're crazy. My prediction is they won't even make it on the primary ticket.
I hope so. Yeah, my fear is that, like for the past 4 years, we've been saying like, what if Trump wasn't a complete dummy? And I don't think that either of them have what it takes to get this crazy crowd to follow them. I think that this crazy crowd wants something more honestly crazy. Like I think Hawley's crazy and Ted Cruz is crazy, but they're playing this sort of crazy for the crowd. They're insane about their politics, but they're pretending to believe the voter fraud stuff. And I think it's obvious that they're pretending. Like the crowd still likes it because they want somebody standing up for them in Congress. But I think there will be a Marjorie Taylor Greene or someone else who you look into their eyes and you know that you're staring into the void. Someone who's legitimately the craziest person in the room. And I think that person will probably beat them. But if they get in, they're not going to spend their days literally watching 12 hours of Fox News and ordering McDonald's. Like they'll actually be doing dangerous, damaging things at a far faster pace than Trump was capable of or interested in doing. Trump, in his last couple of weeks of being president, isn't really doing anything. They would be using this time to do all sorts of terrible stuff. So I don't know that they're going to have the chance to, but if they do get the chance, I think they'll be incredibly dangerous.
I think that's true of Cruz. I honestly think Hawley really is crazy. I think he's over the edge. And if you look into his eyes, you see this radical wish for power, whatever. Like I don't think he's gonna last. Cruz, without a doubt, Cruz has already proven he has no backbone, no morals, no belief he will not flip on, but he's such a politician. He's such a politician. This is the problem with the people entrenched in the system. You can't get rid of them because they're just too well connected. But Hawley, nah, I don't see him lasting. Hopefully, I don't know. I've underestimated America's stupidity before.
That's the scary part. I agree. I don't see him lasting, but look at Trump. I mean, I think he got a real leg up because he was a reality star. I think that's why America was able to sort of embrace him in the fold in the way that they did. So maybe Hawley needs to jump on a bandwagon. Kim Kardashian's free. Maybe he can marry Kim. They can get a reality show, and then maybe he'll get a leg up for the next election in 2024.
He needs to dance with some stars.
You not give them a game plan. If you would,
she likes crazy. She likes crazy. So hey,
she likes crazy brothers.
That's true.
Okay, you want to talk about some crazy people? I got some more crazy people for you. Although we might not that much oppose what they're doing here. Oh, by the way, heads up to the director. Do we have that second video? Can you give me? Let's go directly to that one when I throw it out. Okay, thank you. Okay, Senator Lindsey Graham is doing the fun thing where you sow and sow and sow, and then you act surprised when you begin to reap. So he was trying to catch a plane. And he was doing it at the same time that many supporters of Trump were in the airport. They'd gone for their little week trip to overthrow the US government, and now they were flying back home. And this is the greeting they gave to Lindsey Graham.
Born and raised in South Carolina, I will make sure I'm not going to touch him. I'm not going to do anything. I'm allowed to speak. I am allowed to speak.
You will not be able to walk down the street. It is today.
It is today.
Okay, there's a lot there to talk about, but really fast, 2 quick notes. 1, just general advice when you're surrounded by Karens, pull your mask up over your nose, Lindsey Graham. What the hell's wrong with you? And 2, there were more people guarding Lindsey Graham there than the Capitol on Wednesday, by the way. Did anyone else notice that?
You're right about the mask. And you know who he just met? He just met Karen. I heard Karen through that entire video. He's walking like, that's who Karen is. That's what they were talking about. Karen can't shut up, you know?
Can you imagine how many Karens are on those planes leaving DC? You read about how the airline union is trying to ban some of these Trump supporters from getting on planes. Can you imagine sharing a plane with these people?
Oh God, no. I mean, I can't imagine being on a plane at all right now, but especially with those people, you know, they're not wearing their masks. Yeah, that was
This, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but this is just like Fox News, right? When Fox News declared Arizona, they all turned on Fox News. Like I think what it is, you just need to give them a chant. I don't think they need to believe, as long as it's something they can chant, they're happy. Whether it's traitor, lock them up, or
3. It comes in 3s. They only can do the 3 beat.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, look. Lindsey Graham, look, obviously, I'm not gonna spare a lot of my sympathy for Lindsey Graham, but like he worked all during the Trump years to give Trump what he wanted. He apologized for Trump. He did that whole performance during the Kavanaugh hearings where he was so mad that people were being mad, being mean to Kavanaugh. And like he would forget all the things that he said about how Trump would be the destruction of their party and everything. He flipped immediately once Trump was a candidate and was loyal. And just because he didn't follow the conspiracy theories about the election, he now belongs, you heard the woman, he belongs in Gitmo. He's on the level of what those people think about Muslims, basically, at this point. And it's like, I saw a tweet that was like, I'm shocked to find out that the monster has turned on its creator. Is there any precedent for this? Yes, this is what happens. You've been fundraising, it's all fun and games to fundraise off these people and feed them nonsense. What's that?
That's Trump's tweet. This is what happened. This is what happened. That's his tweet. I mean, he took responsibility for it. Now we're seeing it. I'm not sure why Lindsey Graham backed off on contesting the Electoral College results. I don't know what the catalyst was, really, because none of it makes sense. He knew the results weren't falsified. He knew there wasn't any stealing of the election. He alluded to as such when he said he was going to go ahead and back the results. So I don't really understand what his game plan is here. Is he just Mr. Wishy-washy and his water seeks its level and he's gonna go where he needs to go at this point?
Yeah, I mean, no backbone and no. They always talk about moral compass. They have no moral compass. He'll flip in a minute. He flipped to Trump. Now he's flipping away from Trump. I think somebody, and again, this is where I talk about people like Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz being connected because they're in there so long. There's somebody with some money, with a PAC, with a backdoor deal or something that said, hey, Lindsey, stop. And he stopped, because these guys, remember, fundraising is what they do, right? And they're all bought and paid for. And he doesn't have an opinion strong enough. If you look at what he and Cruz said about Trump going into Trump's presidency, right? No one changes that much. You know what I mean? Not if you have any backbone, you can't change that much. I remember when Obama wore the tan suit, and I said, one more time, one more day in that tan suit, and you've lost me. I'm done. So this is the same. I love the tan suit because that's his biggest scandal.
That was a big deal.
That's the one we remember.
And he sure looked good in that suit too, if I remember. It looked nice. It was a spring day. It was great. When you talk about fundraising, you talk about who's backing these people. We have people like Jenny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, who helped fund that rally, that Save America rally. So there is a lot of money coming in, and they're looking for those little patsies. They're looking for people like Cruz, people like Hawley, people like Graham, who are gonna go whichever way the check flows, And so we're gonna see. I just don't know how. It makes me think, like, should we all run for office because if these schlubs are doing it? Like, what is happening up there?
I don't mean to get off topic, but you bring up Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife. Imagine being a black man and your wife is yelling against Black Lives Matter. And what's the dinner table like? Excuse me, I'm right here. Again, no backbone. They always talk about morality and this, none. They have no moral compass. There's no wrong with them. It's just which way is the wind blowing? Which way is the money flowing? That's what I'm gonna ride. You know,
and they used to pride themselves on that. They used to pride themselves on being the moral compass of America. Where are the moral compass Republicans? Were they ever?
Yeah, they were the moral compass insofar as telling people to, not give rights to certain groups, don't be like this, don't want this, don't love this. That was how they were the moral compass. They were telling people, if you are a straight, white, Christian, cis individual, then you are good. And what you need to do is you need to attack anyone who deviates from any of those demographic variables.
Absolutely.
Anyway, really fast. I just want to mention this quickly. Lest anyone in the audience start to feel much sympathy for Lindsey Graham. They did sort of come for Lindsey Graham, but let's also bear in mind that they didn't come for Lindsey Graham the way they came for some other politicians, because, and this is part of what is, I assume, going to be a developing story over the next week or so. We're going to find out more about what could have happened on Wednesday. Reuters News journalist Jim Borg said on Twitter, I heard at least 3 different rioters at the Capitol say that they hope to find Vice President Mike Pence and execute him by hanging him from a Capitol Hill tree as a traitor. It was a common line being repeated. Many more were just talking about how the VP should be executed. And they did, by the way, set up a gallows. They, when they destroyed all the media's equipment, they used the cables to form a noose. And they were bringing bombs and Molotov cocktails and guns and all sorts of things like that. They had been told, like people like Lynn Wood were saying, Pence needs to be executed. Trump was saying he can save us. If he doesn't, I don't like him so much anymore. And so it's possible that they were just joking about murdering the vice president. It's also possible that that's what they came to do, some of them. So maybe we'll learn more in the future about that.
It's upsetting.
It's a level of anger. I don't know what would make these people happy. Because when you look at it, for the last 4 years, they've had the White House, they've had the Senate, they've taken over the Supreme Court, right? We now have a handmaid. We got I Love Beer and a handmaid on the Supreme Court. So it's like, what do you want? What makes so just because the vice president says, hey, I'm gonna observe the Constitution, they're like, kill him. Like they've been yelling Constitution the whole time. So these are people who are unhinged and just want to be angry. I don't know why you keep, when I say you, I mean why anyone tries to appease this group or even talk to them like they're rational.
Yeah. There's a disconnect. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think the one answer is that these people were sort of implicitly promised the 50s. They were promised that America is going to be made great again, and most of them didn't mean that our trade ratio with China would be improved. They thought, we're going to go back to a time when people like me are respected the way we should be respected. And in this case, I'm talking about them, but literally people who look like me will be respected the way they're supposed to be. And they got all that political power, but we still live in a multicultural democracy, and they're not fans of that. So I think it's complicated. There's a lot of explanations. That doesn't explain all of it, but I think that is part of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we do have to take a quick break though. When we come back, little update on some of the arrests that have been made, as well as further cabinet picks for Joe Biden. So we'll be back in just a few minutes with that.
Old school's pitched to me from Jake. It'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? What are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps fucking cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong, I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times. Yuck. But what makes you stop right before 40? You know, what makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the you said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m. And there's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
I heard of it. I just had some in the car.
I'll tell you who I'm not f***ing, Ben Mankiewicz. Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough.
Kingsley.
See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Greg starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just gonna ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies, and members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. TYT.com, join and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
Good.
John, come back.
Electric cars are awesome, but they aren't the best tool for every job. You can't park them on the edge of the sidewalk while you run into the store for a few things. On top of that, an electric car is just financially out of reach for many people. That's where Zoom electric scooters come in. When I say electric scooter, I'm talking about small motorcycles with space in front of you to put your feet. The Zoom scooter has a range of 60 miles, offers a smooth ride up to 40 miles per hour, and can be charged from any electrical outlet. Start saving on gas while reducing your carbon footprint. To find out more, go to tyt.com/Zoom. Enter the code TYT50 to get an additional discount.
I'm Brett. I would like to refer to this segment as the Do I Still Have This Talent show. So I want to see if I can play harmonica without my hands. I don't know why I have that. Nothing's gonna be more impressive than that. I can also spin a basketball on my finger. While drinking. I'm gonna spin a basketball on my finger while drinking apple juice. You can do this, dude. It's also flat. I don't know if that helps or hurts. And it seems to be somewhat wobbly. Ta-da! Nope, I don't know how to do this one. This one's a fail. Nope. Oh God, I'm so mad.
Our community faces a never-before-seen public health and economic crisis. Businesses are calling Levin Papantonia with their legal questions regarding COVID-19. You've asked and we've answered. If you're a business owner and have suffered financial loss or closure from COVID-19 and have questions regarding your insurance policy, call us for a free consultation. Some policies may provide coverage for lost profits and earnings. Stay safe, and together we'll get through this.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Young Turks with me, John Aderola, Viviana, and Alonso. We got a couple more stories to get to, including, oh my God, consequences for actions in this economy? Okay, we've got a few of them. I don't remember how to cover this, but we're gonna push through. Here we go. Law enforcement officers trying to track down those who engage in the sort of activity you're seeing in that video right there found their job made a little bit easier by the fact that virtually every single person in there wouldn't wear a mask and recorded themselves doing all of the law breaking, sometimes in real time, filming and live streaming and things like that while they were there. Other times leaving after having done it and then recording videos of themselves saying which crimes they just committed. So one individual, perhaps other than Viking Horns Goatman, the most iconic of the people who broke into the Capitol is this individual. So you're seeing him right there, Richard Barnett. And we know his name because he filmed himself in the speaker's office with his face visible, and he was incredibly prolific on social media leading up to that event. He has now been arrested. He was apprehended in Arkansas and charged with entering and remaining on restricted grounds, violent entry, and theft of public property. Barnett bragged to reporters about what he had done shortly after exiting the Capitol. Apparently, materials were taken from Pelosi during the raid with potential national security implications. One of her laptops was stolen. They say it was only used for presentations. But in theory, both the things that were taken as well as the things that remain behind electronically need to be checked to make sure that they weren't manipulated. So he faces a maximum penalty of 1 year in prison, We have details on one other individual, which we'll get to in a second. There are about 13 individuals, I think, who have already facing charges. But so far, it looks like other than those who are directly involved in the violence and the killing of several individuals, the killing of a police officer, this is probably something like what the consequences they'll face once they're identified.
1 year? 1 year.
Maximum of 1 year.
So what? Nothing.
I mean, it seems like a lot for me, but I'm not, a terrorist.
I don't know.
Yes.
I would expect a lot more if you bust into the Capitol and steal and break things. I would imagine there'd be a lot more consequences than that. And I don't think he's going to even serve any time. Look at Kyle Rittenhouse. Also, where was Kyle Rittenhouse? Isn't he supposed to be out there protecting buildings?
That's a good point.
Yeah. You look at that picture of this guy, and that just looks like more than 1 year in jail. Okay, and in going back to, remember the book and the movie A Time for a Kill, you remember at the very end when McConaughey gave the whole speech and then said, now imagine she was white. Just picture a black person sitting like that in Nancy Pelosi's office and tell me that would be 1 year.
Tell me he'd be alive still.
Picture a Muslim sitting in the Capitol, in the Capitol, sitting like that in Nancy Pelosi's office, and tell me that looks like 1 year. That would be Gitmo. That would be you're a traitor. And to steal a computer from the Speaker of the House's office, you don't know what's on that computer. No one knows. No, this is ridiculous. 1 year. I could joke about this forever, but on a serious note, that doesn't look like 1 year.
The city center here in Los Angeles, and during the uprising, they had vans, police, sheriff department vans, 6 of them, rolling up La Brea Avenue, heading to where the uprising had started first in the Fairfax district. They managed to round up all of those protesters who were in fact peaceful protesters for the most part. Sure, some of them were breaking windows with nobody inside, mind you. And they were all they managed to arrest those people. This man not only went in there, broke everything, he walked out free as a bird, gave an interview to the press about all of the crimes he just committed, and then was able to go home. Sure, they went and found him 2 days later after he brazenly flaunted everything that he did. If he was a black man, Alonzo, he wouldn't have made it out of that building. He wouldn't have made it in the building either, but he certainly wouldn't have made it out. That was a display of white privilege and white supremacy and the entitlement that these people felt walking in there, that they have dominion over this land that they think they colonized themselves. They have dominion over those buildings and they have dominion over people of color. And they are wrong, and we're not going to be dissuaded by these people. And he needs to be held accountable. And I hope the Biden administration is ready to go to bat, because 1 year is not going to cut it for me.
I will say this very quick. I have started a GoFundMe to get the Capitol Police some rubber bullets, because apparently they've run out of them. So we're going to buy them some, and maybe next time they'll be ready.
Chokeholds are free, and they usually use those all the time. So I don't know what was going on.
So the thing about this individual is, at least as far as we can tell now, he broke in, he broke stuff, he stole stuff. He doesn't so far seem like one of the ones that was involved in the actual, like the dozens of cops who were injured or the one who was killed. But there is reason to believe that in theory, he could have ended up going even worse in here. We've got some quotes from him from past posts. He said at one point, now we have a term that fits me and many others, and they try to turn it bad. I am white. There is no denying that. I am a nationalist. I put my nation first, so that makes me a white nationalist. F&A, we are nationalists. You aren't? Then get the F out of our nation. And he also said just in December, he came into this world kicking and screaming, covered in someone else's blood, and that he was not afraid to go out the same way.
I like how he referred to his mother as someone else.
Yeah, that's sort of weird.
It's a little impersonal, sir.
And again, I'm not sure of how the law works, but if you break into Walmart and steal a laptop, don't you get more than 1 year?
If you're black, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, this is like, couldn't they just use the, breaking and entering is a felony, right? Stealing like that is a felony. If they forget about the national security,
they're only charging him with trespassing.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
Basically, yeah.
They didn't walk on a lawn. They weren't trespassing through a public space. They busted windows through the Capitol, walked in. Now we are going to find out in time to come that there were cops, the Capitol Police, there were people who were in on this. Obviously, we've seen the footage of them just sitting there doing nothing, opening the barricades, taking selfies. They were aware that this was gonna happen. That mob was prepped. They were told that they were not gonna be met with resistance. They were told that they were not gonna be shot at. When that woman was killed, they said, oh, it's just a flashbang. They were told that they were gonna be allowed to do it, and they went ahead and did it. And we are gonna find out who in fact was involved on the inside in every single coup. Part of the police are part of it. Every single coup in history, we've known that there's these insiders that allow it to happen. So we see this. Now, every tweet that man made on Facebook, whatever, anything incendiary comment that he mentioned, now should be held against him. They all should be held as tried as treasonous, I think. I mean, it's beyond breaking and entering.
Well, this event really, I think, like if you're watching this, especially if you're outside of this country and you don't get how our politics works, which I understand because none of it really makes any sense. The relationship between the right and law enforcement, this is like the perfect example of how it works. Like you have multiple instances of evidence of the cops siding with these, like with the people trying to literally break down the doors and get in there and all of that. And then they get in there and they bash in the head of a cop and kill him. Like they align themselves with these movements, and these movements are always the ones that end up killing them. The sovereign citizens who ambushed them, the Boogaloo boys who shot them during the protests this summer. Like they will always prefer these people, and these people will in the end return their favor with blood. That's just the way it goes. And I don't understand it. You had some cops standing aside, letting them in. You had others literally being killed. Anyway, I did want to mention one other individual who is going to be facing some charges. This is Lonnie Kaufman of Alabama. Drove his pickup truck carrying nearly a dozen Molotov cocktails, 2 handguns, and an M4 assault rifle, just a short distance from where a crowd of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol. First Assistant US Attorney Ken Cole said some of the Molotov cocktails retrieved by law enforcement officials contained gasoline and styrofoam, making them homemade napalm. But it was just a goof. It was just like they got out of control a little bit. I mean, sure, some people brought pipe bombs and some people brought napalm, but it's just a goof. Everybody move on, or at least Tucker Carlson would have.
Boys will be boys, right? White boys will be boys. They're the only ones allowed.
Those are the only boys, exactly.
I don't want to ever hear anybody saying anything about looting Targets ever again in my life. Okay, you go in there and you steal a couple of, I don't even know what people were taking out of Target. Toilet paper, I guess that's the hot commodity these days. And then they're just they're turning a blind eye to breaking into the Capitol, stealing podiums. I mean, it's like a Lampoon Vacation movie.
Right. Well, if you like you said, John, if you look like you and do it, you're a patriot. And if you look like me and you do it, you're a thug. It's really that simple. And like you said, Viviana, the cops are in on, like, how are they not going after the cops that were taking selfies? Do you not need more proof? You have a selfie. One of the beautiful things about their stupidity is they post their crimes. Like one of the first things you learn in crime school is don't tell anybody. Not take a picture of it and put it out there. You didn't go to crime school, so
yeah,
they're terrible criminals.
Terrible. They're an embarrassment to criminals. They really are. There are criminals shaking their head today saying, I can't believe it. I can't
What's
believe
going to happen to them when they do go do some time, when they're with other criminals? What are they going to be treated like inside? That's the real question.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have any time for any more questions. That's all the time we have for the first hour. But thank you to both of you for joining me and walking through this pretty tough hour of news. Where can people see more of your work?
Well, you can catch me on my show that I've been producing, Contextualize This. We have a new episode coming up next week with Professor Thayez. He's going to be talking about the construct of whiteness. as well as a very special episode with my father, who's been doing some research. He's a cultural anthropologist that's been doing research in education the last 50 years in East LA. And he's been studying Roosevelt and Garfield High School, very prominent high schools in East LA, and the evolution of education. So follow me on Twitter, Viviana Vigil, just Viviana Vigil. And you can check it out on Periscope as well as YouTube and Facebook.
Awesome.
AlonzoBowden.com is the website. You can get to everything I do from there. And Zo Funny on Instagram. All my stuff is Alonzo Bowden except Instagram, ZO Funny. BODDEN, by the way. So thank you and good night. I don't know. What are we saying goodbye, John?
It's kind of late. Yeah, we're gonna be saying goodbye. Everyone, check out
Alonzo. You're hilarious. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Viviana. You are a brilliant woman. It's nice to meet you here, and we'll cross paths again. Absolutely.
So.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for watching the first hour. We're gonna take a short break. We come back. Anna's gonna be on another awesome hour of news, so don't go anywhere.
Came in late to watch TYT Old School, and I hear Cenk Uygur talking about napkins. Is this the kind of nonsense Anna Kasparian was talking about? Gotta love membership privileges. Gotta love them.
Please have Dave on every 4 episodes or so.
Watching Ben Mankiewicz and Cenk Uygur on Old School talking is exactly like watching Seinfeld and George. I'm not sure if that's a compliment.
Who's on Old School today? Is there one? At Dave Kohler. I hope it's not Brett Ehrlich.
This episode of Old School has killed me. Who knew a conversation about good and bad underwear could be so hilarious and relatable?
Couple things about this video. Dave Kohler looks so badass.
There's more than a 73% chance this Old School will be really funny. Cenk Uygur has been up since 4 a.m, so he's tired. Hence, everything will seem funnier to him. P.S. Remember, food talk, new words, and no or very little politics.
Dave Kohler, enjoyed performance on Old School. Can we please hear about your time as a geologist? One geologist to another?
I appreciate that all these people enjoy it because I know Cenk loves to do it, and he does it because he knows the fans love it too.
This looks like a conspiracy. This looks like a scheme to defraud.
The Bush administration put folks into the regulatory agencies who believed in destroying regulations.
Memories of the Great Depression faded.
They stood on the floor of the Senate day after day attacking what they were trying to do.
They just generated all this junk, took home huge bonuses, and then when it collapsed, they said, oh, not us.
What they ginned up was pure extortion, putting a gun to the head of Congress.
Time and again, they heard the devastation that was happening in low and moderate income communities caused by bankers, by lenders, and they chose to ignore it.
I understood that the SEC was not merely a weakened version of what it was supposed to be. It was an agent of Wall Street.
When no one's enforcing the law, the criminals take over.
Many of you already know that the TYT Army has been officially organizing for the past year. They're making decisions on which candidates and elected officials to help and always coming up with ways to inform people about progressive policies. Now, we want to give a huge shout out to some special volunteers and highlight accomplishments of our TYT Army. In Michigan, State Leader Tara West and Captain Justine Robinson organized the team's first Beer and Politics. How fun does that sound? Look, they thought of this idea at one of their monthly meetups in order to help connect TYT supporters and grow their team's volunteers. Here's what Tara had to say. Our first Beer and Politics event in Grand Rapids was a success. We had 5 new people show up who are enthusiastic about TYT. They all found out about our event through our text bank, and they liked the laid-back nature of our get-together. Looking forward to connecting with them next month and hopefully meeting a few more. Thank you, Tara and Justine, for leading the way in Michigan. To learn more about the TYT Army and how you can help from home or even start your own team, head to tyt.com/army. Check your spam folder for lost emails to stay up to date with our events.
How would I look walking a dog on the White House lawn? Would that be?
I'm Mike Shekels, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations. So if you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it. This here is Johnny Greenwald.
I'm Manager of Post-Production Technology. Simplest terms is I deliver the content.
And this is our master control room. We have many, many more destinations than ever before, and we created this room to consolidate it, to make sure that everything's going out is up to standard, so we meet all of our contractual agreements.
What's up, friends? Welcome back to TYT. Whole new panel, whole new lead host. What's up? I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us today is someone you're probably familiar with in the progressive media world. Farron Cousins joins us. He is the host of Ring of Fire and also the executive editor of Trial Lawyer magazine. Also joining us, making his debut on TYT is Frederick Joseph. He's the author of The Black Friend. Frederick, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Farron. I'm really looking forward to today's show.
Thank you.
All right, well, we have some big news to start with, something that just broke prior to going on air, so let's get right to it. Big news in the social media world, it's finally happened. Twitter has decided to permanently ban Donald Trump from its platform. In fact, they announced this in a tweet that I'll share with you. They claim that after a close review of recent tweets from Donald Trump's account and the context around them, we have permanently suspended the account due to the risk of further incitement of violence. And as you guys know, this comes following what happened earlier this week with Trump supporters rioting in the Capitol. They broke into the Capitol building several times. That led to a total of 5 people dying. One of them, a DC Capitol Police officer, and then there were 4 rioters who died as well, including one woman who got shot within the Capitol building, which was, an absolutely hideous thing that happened in this country. So Trump has put out all sorts of statements that have incited violence throughout his first term. So it's not shocking to me that he was continuing to do it even after Twitter had decided to suspend him earlier this week. But after that suspension, he was back on Twitter, and I don't know what he tweeted out specifically that led to this decision. But they decided that no, now we're gonna do they said permanent suspension, which is kind of a conflicting statement. It's a ban, like permanent ban. Suspension's different. But anyway, he's gone from Twitter forever based on what they're saying. What do you guys make of this?
Well, I think this is obviously kind of a logical conclusion for Twitter to go ahead and come to at this point. They've been teasing it out for weeks. We've all seen it that, oh, don't worry, as soon as he's not president, he loses the world leader status. We can totally ban him. Like they knew they were gonna have to do it. But then I think after what happened this week, then they saw Facebook and Instagram go ahead and do the same thing. They thought, okay, well now we're behind the curve. We've got to do this because everybody else is doing it. We don't want to look like the only people still giving him a platform. So I feel like they feel like this was definitely something they had to do, especially because we're already seeing these people, these pro-Trump protesters are already talking about more events, I guess you could call them, for lack of a better term. So we know
more attacks
they're not done. Right, exactly. That's the best way to say it. More attacks. So we know they want to do more. And Twitter has finally said, look, enough's enough. We put our own rule in place that we couldn't ban him. Let's go ahead and not follow our own rule. And I think they did the right thing.
It is interesting that Twitter was the last social media platform to ban Trump, and that Facebook and Instagram had done it prior to Twitter making the decision, because I felt like in terms of fact checking Donald Trump's deceptions, Twitter was a little more willing to do it as opposed to Facebook. So it is kind of shocking that he's been banned from all of these platforms. But Frederick, let me go to you, because one question that I have, I want to celebrate, of course, because he's been such a terrible, motivating factor behind some of the horrible events that have happened in this country, not just over this past week, but obviously, the beginning of his presidency started with the Charlottesville, hate marchers saying the Jews will not replace us. Are you you at all worried that this could have unintended consequences like censorship for other people on these social media platforms?
No, I'm not worried about that at all, frankly, because I think that the suspension is a day late and a dollar short, right? This is something that people have been asking for, as you said, since Charlottesville and before. The reality is this, you brought up the fact that Twitter was the last major social media outlet to do this. Let's be honest. The reason for that is that it's his primary source of communication, right? He has 88 million followers, and at the end of the day, Twitter has shareholders, and whether it's good people or bad people, quote unquote, they are still people using the platform. So, I do think that for those of us on the other side of things, this is something to celebrate. But there needs to be accountability, and I don't worry about the Donald Trumps and the Trump Juniors and Ben Shapiro's of the world having their accounts suspended, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point by mentioning some of the more provocative right wingers who don't really, cross that boundary, or at least I haven't noticed them cross that boundary too often, where they start inciting violence. They just have provocative opinions, and I certainly think that those opinions, while I wholeheartedly disagree with them and I find them abhorrent, like I don't think that they should be censored on these platforms. I think inciting violence, for me at least, is a very specific thing that you should at least have a discussion about when you're considering banning someone from one of these platforms. I've pretty much been against censorship on these platforms, with the exception of Alex Jones, and I explained my reasoning behind that. He did incite violence. He was directing his audience members to go after the Posner family, who had lost a son during the Sandy Hook shooting massacre. And so with his allegations of false flag operations and all of that stuff, his unhinged fans decided to harass this family to the point where they had to move 7 different times. They had all sorts of terrifying voicemail messages and threats against them. And so they were terrorized by his supporters. And I thought, look, this is an extreme case where it makes sense to deplatform someone. And really, Donald Trump is no different. Donald Trump does incite violence. He encourages his supporters. In fact, the very day that the right-wing extremists decided to break into the Capitol building and rain terror on anyone in there, they were encouraged by Donald Trump. He had a rally, and toward the end of the rally, he encouraged them to march to the Capitol. And he didn't say specifically do what you did, but he speaks in a language that makes it pretty clear that he wants them to get physical, to force their way into getting what they want on behalf of what he wants. And I think that's incredibly dangerous. We've already experienced so many incidents, involving his incitement.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I have a question here too. It's like, how long is it going to be now until he issues the executive order trying to get rid of the Section 230 protections, now that he's so ticked off at all of these social media outlets here? And the funny thing about that is that that's actually going to hurt these conservative folks a lot more. And yet they've all said, we've got to do this, we've got to take away these protections. But these protections are actually their protections. That's what allows them to say the crazy things without getting banned left and right. Because when you take away those protections, suddenly Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whoever it is, they face the full liability for everything that gets posted on their site. And it will result, I believe, if he gets rid of 230, in widespread censorship of everybody left and right. If that's where that would head, just because they have to play it safe. And who knows how far it would extend? Would it go to YouTube? Would it go to these other video platforms too? So that's a slippery slope. That's the slippery slope, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And a dangerous, angry Trump could easily do something like that.
Well, the good news about Section 230, and let me be clear, Section 230 has its own issues and flaws, that's for sure. And members of both parties have wanted to reform Section 230 because it just provides too much of a liability shield for these social media platforms. However, these social media platforms realized that members of both parties were looking to reform this policy. And so what they did while Donald Trump was renegotiating NAFTA, or what he now refers to as USMCA, was they ensured that Section 230 was baked into that trade deal. And that's really important because the United States unilaterally cannot just repeal Section 230. It's very likely that you would have to get other countries involved. The social media outlets could easily file a lawsuit against the US government for doing it unilaterally. David Dayen from the American Prospect did a fantastic job outlining the details of that in June, by the way, of 2020. So well before Trump was calling for Section 230 to be repealed. So I don't think that Trump is gonna be able to do that through executive order. So I guess we're safe on that end. And honestly, Trump is at his lowest. I don't know if he has the ability to do anything at this point. Lisa Murkowski is now the first Republican who's on the record calling for Trump to resign. And she says that if he does not resign, she'll be leaving the Republican Party. So that's some pretty big news as well. We'll see how it all plays out. But this is big news. I honestly did not expect this to happen, but we'll give you guys more details as we learn more. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to other news today, because we do have some updates on stories that we shared with you earlier this week. Off-duty police officers and members of the military actually showed up as part of the group rioting in the Capitol, the same group that broke into the Capitol building, the same day where 4 people, including 1 woman, were killed within the Capitol building. A cop was also killed as a result of trying to enforce the law as these rioters were wreaking havoc throughout the Capitol area. Now, with that said, I'm very curious what's gonna happen to these particular individuals who decided to show up and be part of the rioting that took place. So Politico reported on this, writing that one current Metro DC police officer said in a public Facebook post that off-duty police officers and members of the military who were among the rioters flashed their badges and ID cards as they attempted to overrun the building. If these people can storm the Capitol building with no regard to punishment, you have to wonder how much they abuse their powers when they put on their uniforms. Well, I mean, I think we know how much they abuse their powers. There was an uprising in this country over the summer as a result of that. And unfortunately, that has led to pretty much nothing. But let me give you more details about this story. Off-duty and former law enforcement officers from New Hampshire, Oakland, Texas, and elsewhere participated in this riot. Videos have also circulated online, appearing to show Capitol police officers taking selfies with these rioters. We have video of them even opening the barricades. It was a complete and utter disaster. I mean, really a situation that highlighted a lot of the broken policing that exists in this country. And it's not as though, it's not as if they didn't know what they were doing. The whole point of this was the Stop the Steal rally. It followed the Stop the Steal rally. These are people who didn't like the results of the election and really thought they could go in there into the Capitol building while every member of Congress was there, by the way, and force their way into overturning the election results, something incredibly unconstitutional, undemocratic. And now we know that we have off-duty police officers who showed up in order to at least attempt to undermine our system of government and our democratic process. So Frederick, I want to start with you. I mean, I'm sure you weren't surprised at this update to the story, but I wanted to get some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The first thought that comes to mind is all the people who have said things like, this isn't America, this isn't who we are. And my question for them is, well, please let me know what America you live in, right? This has always been the issue. We've seen police officers putting up white power signs. We saw cadets actually during their finishing of the police academy some months back, throwing up the white power sign as well. It's, as you said, why we marched, and there were 14,000 arrests during those Black Lives Matter marches. This issue is pervasive And it's the history of policing in our country, from Rodney King to Breonna Taylor. This isn't getting any better. So we have to start, for the people who have been saying reform the police, we have to start having serious conversations about what that actually means, because we have cameras, we have names, and we have all these things that we need to hold these people accountable, and it's not happening. So what exactly are we reforming? There need to actually be accountable next steps to real systemic change.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. And so, there have already been updates in regard to leadership within, the DC Capitol Police and, people in the higher echelons of policing who really dropped the ball on what happened that day. However, it's not just about them. I mean, we can't pretend as if this is just a leadership problem. Again, you have off-duty cops and members of the military. I mean, these are people who are they're supposed to be protecting our democracy, right? That's what we hear about all the time. These are our American heroes because they're the ones who protect our freedoms. They engaged in a riot that was meant, the intention, although they failed, their intention was to overturn the results of an election, a democratically elected person. Like, they don't like that person. They don't want him to come into power. They want their guy to remain in power. And they wanted to just basically throw out our whole democratic process that led to President-elect Joe Biden, who, to be fair, not my favorite person to lead the country, but a democracy is a democracy, and he won the election fair and square. Farron, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. And to kind of add on to what Frederick was talking about here, what exactly does need to change? Because we do have the cameras, we get the badge numbers, we know their names, we see these individuals. And one of the things, and this is unfortunately the only thing I know we can do at the moment, but it goes to accountability. If we do not have this accountability, the culture inside the police force of the United States will never change. It will continue to attract the same kind of people who understand they can do these horrific things and they won't ever get away with it. And that's why one of the things that has to happen as a result of this is that, yes, we have to have investigations, but you can't let the police officers do those investigations. This isn't something that even a prosecutor with a grand jury should be in charge of. We've seen what that does in this country, and it doesn't work. What has to happen is Congress has to have the investigation. They have to call these people in, sit them before Congress, sit them in front of the cameras, and force them to answer to the entire country for their actions. That is what it's going to take, and Congress has to do it. We cannot let the police forces and their prosecutor friends do these investigations themselves. We saw just this week what that gets us with Jacob Blake. We saw that will not work. So Congress has to be the one to step in and do this. And that's just the first step. But that is a necessary step that has to happen here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also want to bring up one other thing, because we've been talking throughout the week about how it was strange to see how outmanned the DC police were, especially because we have been seeing both on social media and through Trump's own rhetoric, provocations, threats of violence on January 6th. So you would expect the police to be ready for it. It now appears that this was intentional. Let me give you more details from the Associated Press. 3 days before supporters of President Trump rioted at the Capitol, the Pentagon asked the US Capitol Police if it needed National Guard manpower. And as the mob descended on the building Wednesday, Justice Department leaders actually reached out to offer up FBI agents. The police turned them down both times, according to senior defense officials and 2 people familiar with the matter. As we've mentioned before, one Capitol police officer died. Reports indicate that he was hit with a fire extinguisher and then later died from the injuries. And so, you have off-duty cops and members of the military engaging in this riot that led to a cop dying because they were overwhelmed, by the way. And you have scenes like what you're about to see. I wanna give you a few details though before we get to this video. You see people trying to break into the speaker's room. And when they're doing that, you can see an individual cop on the other side of the glass pointing a gun. This is what happened right before the female Trump supporter was shot. It's not as graphic, but I do want to give you a sense of what this looked like. So as you guys can see on the other side of the glass, you have members of Congress. They hadn't been evacuated yet. So that is what the scene was like for members of Congress who luckily were able to evacuate. They sheltered in place. No one got hurt. Later, we saw images of one masked individual holding zip ties because he was planning on holding people hostage, probably members of Congress. But it was just a shameful day that showed just how scary policing is in this country when you really think about it. Because when it comes to Black Lives Matter, when it comes to people who are protesting in regard to healthcare, they'll do what they need to do. They'll come ready. But it was very clear that at least a portion of the law enforcement involved in what happened that day decided to protect these rioters or turn a blind eye to these rioters. And now we know, for certain that you had police, off-duty police among the rioters as well. All right, we gotta take a quick break, but when we come back, we're actually gonna stay on this topic and give you more details about the police officer who died as he was trying to engage with these rioters. We'll come right back.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was Too Strong Coffee? Yes, new twostrongcoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at twostrongcoffee.com/TYT.
That's 300 million, that's a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world. We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks has just passed another milestone. 15 billion views. Damn. All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Rob Shively, what do you know? Rob says, rejoice for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me or is Meghan McCain talking as fast as Ben Shapiro? Is that the way the right tries to look smart and intellectual? Well, yes.
Michael Nathan writes it on Twitter. Did Anna choose Cenk's outfit today? I'm sure it wasn't Cenk himself. Man Bun Jenkins Skinny Jeans says, so now Anna has pointed out, okay, that's his handle.
T. Joyce, 1971, saying Donald Trump is good at pulling out of things, NAFTA, the Iran deal, NATO. It's just too bad Fred Trump didn't.
All right, let me do a little quick plug here. It's not even a plug, I'm bragging, okay? I'm bragging, watch me. We have a channel on YouTube, a whole channel devoted just to the Young Turks. It's badass, right? Wow, man.
I can see the void.
You guys are rock stars.
Unbelievable, Senator Sanders. Welcome to Rebel Headquarters. Man, you guys are amazing. We gave you what you wanted. Okay. Speaking of shirts.
I have a surprise.
You reached a lot of people. You are the Young Turks. And we have spread that progressive message wide and far. Let's keep it going.
Do you know what we do online these days? Everything. You know that. You're watching the show online. You do your banking, credit cards, passwords, all online. So do you need to be safe? Of course, it's not an option. PureVPN helps protect you online, and they actually do it for up to 10 devices, which is great. And they've got deals right now. That's why I like this sponsor. I want you to go check it out, tyt.com/purevpn. Make sure you protect yourself online. It's really important. tyt.com/purevpn. Cool news, shoptyt.com now has books. There's a whole bunch of books there. You're gonna be shocked to find out that they're largely progressive. Of course! Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People, is there. It's a fantastic story from Jesse Jackson to Bernie Sanders to AOC that explains the progressive movement probably better than any book I've ever read. Speaking of awesome books, my dad's got a book out called The Original Young Turk, where he goes from the poorest olive farmer you ever met in your life to living the American dream.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. We got a lot more news to get to, so let's get right to it. So we were talking earlier about the police and the lack of preparedness in responding to the rioters. Well, a US Capitol police officer has died after attempting to control rioters as they broke into the Capitol building. Now, the details are slim at this point, even though the identity of the officer has been released. We don't know the specific details of the injuries that he suffered, but I'll give you the details we do know right now. The officer who died, it was Officer Brian Sicknick. He's with the United States Capitol Police, and his family is pleading with the public to give them a little bit of privacy and to not make his death political. But I do want to give you some details about what we know and how he died. The Capitol Police said in the statement that Sicknick was injured while physically engaging with protesters. He collapsed after returning to his division office and was rushed to a hospital where officials said he died at 9:30 p.m. on Thursday. At some point in the chaos, this is according to the New York Times, with the mob rampaging through the halls of Congress while lawmakers were forced to hide under their desks, he was struck with a fire extinguisher, according to 2 law enforcement officials. That's all we know so far. We don't know any other details. We don't know where he was struck. We don't know if the individual who struck him is in custody. We do know that there's a full-blown investigation to find more details. In fact, the FBI and DC police will jointly investigate the case, and the Department of Defense will spare no resources in investigating and holding accountable those responsible. But as you guys know, there was a mixed response by police who were actually on the scene as the rioters breached the Capitol. We saw proof, images, videos of some of these cops who were enabling the rioters, opening barricades to let them in some cases. We saw video from Baked Alaska's stream where you see police taking selfies with these rioters. And by the way, it's not really that shocking. I mean, we've seen so many examples, like in the situation with Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where the cops were very friendly with right-wing gang members, but vicious to Black Lives Matter protesters. But with that said, the actions of the bad actors here, the cops who love to enable these rioters and people like that, led to one United States Capitol police officer dying as a result of being violently assaulted with a fire extinguisher by one of the rioters. So you guys jump in. I mean, it's just disgusting. Like everything that happened that day was absolutely disgusting. So I'll let whoever wants to jump in first share their thoughts.
Yeah, this shows me, and it should show everyone that the Blue Lives Matter group is showing that Blue lives only matter so long as they're taking Black and brown lives, apparently, right? This was never about policing. This was never about protecting the blue or anything like that. Always about upholding white supremacy. And even when the police are the obstacles, they will be removed as need be for white supremacists, and then for those who are aligned with the white supremacists, as you said, not new. We saw this in Kenosha with Kyle Rittenhouse, but the question becomes, when will something be done about it? Because this culture is absolutely pervasive. This is something that we said before the break. This lack of accountability creates a God complex almost for the police around the entire country. They can do whatever they want, whenever they want. You had people in Nancy Pelosi's aide's office walking out of the office. If I was to do the exact same thing, I would be dead right now, Anna. Like, I would literally be dead. A black man cannot walk into the office of the Speaker of the House and attempt to kidnap her or whatever they were going to do with the zip ties and walk out unscathed, right? They have a search for these people now. Why do you have a search for them? Because you didn't arrest them in the first place.
No, but I mean, of course, you're right in everything you just said, especially when you consider like the sense of entitlement by the rioters who did breach the Capitol building and were just roaming around willy-nilly, no mask. And I'm not even talking about COVID mask. I'm talking about they didn't cover their faces because they realized they were engaging in criminality. They were emboldened. They had no fear. They felt they had a right to be there. I mean, the guy in Pelosi's office has been arrested. But look, I mean, look at him like taking pictures, talking to reporters outside of the Capitol building, following the vandalism he engaged in. He stole a piece of mail from Nancy Pelosi's desk. I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, they had no fear. They weren't worried about any type of viciousness or brutality, or even they weren't worried about cops even doing their jobs in this case, right? They weren't worried about arrests. It's just beyond shameful. But yeah, Farron, jump in.
What's really interesting too is in one of the video clips, it was part of the clip you showed earlier. It's a little further in it, but they're shocked. These insurrectionists were shocked that the police officers were not on their side at that moment. And that alone tells you so much about what they understand about police here in the United States. Like, I thought we were friends. I thought you were my bro. Why are you not moving aside to let this happen? They were absolutely stunned that 2 police officers, I think it was maybe 3, refused to step aside for them. And then of course, the second the police do, and they don't realize you've got the other people coming up the stairs, they break the windows. And then of course, more tragedy happens there. But they, honest to God, believe these police are on their side. And from most of the footage we have seen, I agree. There's more footage too of the one cop waving him in. Come on in. He's going. So this is so systemic with these police officers that they can't separate, the person next to them with the MAGA cape or the person next to them with a police badge. These insurrectionists view these as the same person, and in many cases they are.
Yeah, one video that is going to be in my memory permanently was this exchange between one, a Capitol police officer and a rioter. And the rioter's like in his face screaming at this cop. And he's specifically saying something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines of, we supported you when everyone hated you. How dare you? Like he was just in his face and angry that, and by the way, the cop wasn't even being brutal with them. The cop was just trying to prevent them from breaking into the area where lawmakers were. That was all he was trying to do. And they were incredibly furious. Like, how dare you? How could you have the audacity to try to enforce the law with us or police us? Like we were on your side, right? And so, and their actions, both with what happened regarding the Capitol Police refusing assistance when they were asked by, when they were asked whether or not they would need backup ahead of time, right, on that day. And then after the fact, after the rioters had already stormed the Capitol Police were asked again if they wanted backup, and they still said no. It wasn't until Mike Pence was asked that they brought in more law enforcement to handle the crowd, to handle the situation. So those actions, those decisions that they made, those awful decisions, and you gotta investigate what motivated those decisions, led to one of their colleagues getting killed. So we'll see if they go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just gonna say, we also have to deal with the fact that they knew for days. They had names.
Yep.
You know, these people were not making it a secret what they wanted to do, where they were going to be, and who they were. You know, we at Ring of Fire, I'd been doing stories about this long before Wednesday. You know, we knew the names. They were in the articles. You saw it on Parler. You saw it on Fortune. These people were bragging about it ahead of time. So there's no excuse. They knew what was coming, and they made the decision to let it happen before they even got there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I was
Go
just
ahead,
going
Frederick.
to add that, that's because, white rage has never been, a danger to American culture, but Black justice is. And the juxtaposition of seeing the two in just the last few months is so telling, right? Anna was speaking about moments that will be in her mind forever. Well, one moment in my mind from the attack on the Capitol was the armed standoff, because it made me immediately think of Tamir Rice, who had a toy gun on a playground, right? The people who were in that armed standoff with those police officers are still alive. Right, like I want everyone to sit with that for a second. A child, a 12-year-old boy on a playground with a toy gun. Police are trained for moments like that. They were able to, as they have with Kyle Rittenhouse, as they did with Dylan Roof, they were able to get all these people out alive and into jail. But when it comes to Black lives, that seems to be completely beyond their scope of skill set.
Yeah, really great points all around. We got to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what happened that day. But I really also want to discuss what Joe Manchin has done in trying to block relief to Americans. He's already trying to wield his disgusting power that he does not deserve. But I'll give you the details on that more when we come back. I said disgusting because what he's doing is disgusting. I'll explain why when we come back.
We are on to something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors, they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you, that say no corporate back money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats. We're gonna fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free healthcare for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single payer healthcare, debt-free college, and we are gonna get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're gonna do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, the buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Justice Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a betting. Absolutely not.
I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats. The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Did you know that more than 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon? Why? Because of trees. I know what you're thinking. Of course! So what do we want to do? We want to plant more trees so we can save the climate. It's quite literal. So that's what leads to our new partner, Plant Your Change. Love it. It's so easy. What they do is You take the credit or debit cards you already have and you plug it into the system. And if you so choose, you get to round up every purchase to the nearest dollar and they plant a tree for you, okay? Now you could also choose if you wanna do it on only certain kinds of purchases or only so often, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But literally every cent makes a difference here. It's plant your change. And if you wanna know more information, just go to tyt.com/trees. Let's go save the planet together.
Now, top. No. No.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna, Frederick, and Farron with you. So let's get to our last story. I want to spend a good amount of time talking about Joe Manchin because he's already drunk on his own power and it's pretty gross, especially what he's opining on at a time when so many Americans are desperate for economic relief. So Senator Joe Manchin just cannot wait to show the country how eager he is to work with the Republican Party to defeat any effort to provide economic relief to Americans during this pandemic. Now, he has said that he's against beefing up the stimulus checks to $2,000. This is according to a report by the Washington Post. And what he's specifically responding to is what Joe Biden said prior to the Georgia runoff races taking place. Remember, those races were important for the Democratic Party. Those races decided whether the Democrats would take control of the Senate. Now, it would be a very slim majority, of course, with Kamala Harris being the individual who can break a tie between Democrats and Republicans. But nonetheless, Biden made a promise. If you get these Democrats elected, I'm gonna help you out economically. Here's what he had to say.
By electing John and the Reverend, you can make an immediate difference in your own lives, the lives of the people all across this country, because their election will put an end to the block in Washington, that $2,000 stimulus check, that money that will go out the door immediately to help people who are in real trouble. Think about what it'll mean to your lives, putting food on the table.
Biden has also made new stimulus checks a central promise, specifically telling Georgia voters that they would be getting $2,000 payments if these Democrats won the Senate elections in the state this week. But Manchin, according to the Washington Post, did not agree with this. In fact, here's what he said specifically. I don't know where the hell $2,000 came from. I swear to God, I don't. That's another $400 billion, pretending as if he's concerned about deficit spending, which is pathetic. Manchin initially seemed to suggest in an interview with the Washington Post that he was absolutely opposed. However, he did say this later. Maybe there was a little bit of backlash. How is the money that we invest now going to help us best get jobs back and get people employed? And I can't tell you that sending another check out is going to do that to a person that's already got a check. Okay, so before I open it up to the panel. People can't work right now. People can't work right now. People can't work right now. Jobs are like, people are shedding jobs. Companies are shedding jobs because this country did not appropriately respond to the coronavirus. We have 4,000 people dying a day now as a result of the inaction by our federal government. And so people have no choice. So if they're forced to stay home, if they've been laid off through no fault of their own, you need to provide them economic relief. It's not that difficult to understand that. Anyway, go ahead, guys.
It's funny. I had to remind myself today that Joe Manchin's the guy whose daughter, while working with was it Mylan Pharmaceuticals, jacked up the price of EpiPens 600%, and then took a hefty multi-million-dollar bonus off that. And Manchin defended her. That is who Joe Manchin is. Joe Manchin has never done anything for the average working American. I actually sat down earlier today as well, and I did some math because apparently that's what I do now. Joe Manchin represents 1.8 million Americans from West Virginia in the US Senate. The last stimulus check, the first round, 153 million Americans received checks. So this one, the standards were a little bit higher, so more people were eligible. So we're talking about more than 153 million people that were eligible for this latest round of stimulus. And one man is holding up checks for over 153 million Americans, or 47% of the entire country. And it's Joe Manchin. This is no longer having to attack Republicans for obstruction. Joe Manchin is gonna be the target, and we're gonna have to make him the target for pressure for the next at least 2 years.
I mean, look, I would dedicate ads targeted toward his own constituents, calling him out, like, you guys are suffering. And the man who's holding up these more robust stimulus checks. I don't even like saying stimulus. They're not stimulus checks, they're relief checks. Let's be clear about what this is. It's just about giving people, even at $2,000, one-time $2,000 check, it's barely even relief. It's crumbs, okay? At a time when so many people, tens of millions of Americans, still unemployed since the beginning of the pandemic. People need help to pay their bills, to put food on the table. We have insanely long lines at food banks. I mean, we've seen so many examples of people who are living in desperation right now. And then you have Joe Manchin making a Republican talking point about how much it would cost to provide relief to Americans in this moment of crisis. I didn't hear the same language coming out of his mouth when it came to pumping bailout money to these major corporations and banks in the beginning of the pandemic. They got trillions of dollars, whereas average Americans, did not get the relief that they needed to avoid absolute financial ruin. So many people owe back rent. A month ago, the average person owing back rent owed about $5,400. That number is clearly much higher now. So we might have an eviction moratorium, but let's be clear, all of these people who haven't been evicted yet will be evicted if they don't make that one giant payment to their landlords to stay in their units or their homes or wherever they are. All right, so let me give you some more details. Manchin had some other things to say. He clarified also in a follow-up interview that he could potentially support more checks if they were narrow in scope and targeted for people who really need them, which they are targeted toward people who really need them. They're targeted, they're means tested. So these relief checks would go to people who are earning under $75,000 a year. And that's based on their latest tax filing from 2019. It would also start to taper off among people who make more than $75,000, and at $99,000, people who make that amount and more get nothing. It's means tested. So it literally does go toward people who need the relief. And this talking point, again, is something that you're likely to hear from Republican lawmakers. But of course, Joe Manchin, in the way he legislates, is more Republican than Democrat. And he also says if they can direct money and they say this will help stimulate the economy, hell yeah, I'm for it. But basically right now, you better get them vaccinated. So he says, no, we should focus that money on getting people vaccinated, which I agree with that. I also agree with providing economic relief to people. So Frederick, do you have any thoughts on Manchin's statement?
Yeah, I mean, this just shows how out of touch and classist much of the party is, right? There's been a lot of conversation. I think AOC said it best, and if I remember correctly, it was in reference to Joe Biden, that in most other countries, they wouldn't be a part of the same party. And Joe Manchin is the living embodiment of that. I'm not sure in what world $2,000 or $4,000, $1,200, $600 would be significant for people who are struggling. The average rent and mortgage nationwide is about $2,000, meaning that a relief check being given covers your rent, covers your mortgage potentially. And then what are you doing about food? What are you doing about your light bill, so on and so forth? And frankly, as you said, they're acting as if, or he's acting as if everyone got a check. They're already, the checks go to people who need it most, right? And frankly, not even because a lot of people still needed them and didn't receive them at this point. So, I don't have much to say other than the fact that people like Joe Manchin are a virus in the party and need to be held accountable.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I really do think that there needs to be more pressure applied by Democrats toward Joe Manchin, because he's already committed himself to becoming a giant obstacle for the Democratic Party anytime they want to pass bold policy. And in this case, we're not even talking about bold policy, guys. We're just talking about the bare minimum, a one-time $2,000 check to people who desperately need it. And I mean, I've been clear on means testing in the past. I'm gonna say it again. I don't even agree with means testing in this moment, because means testing implies that there's gonna be a delay in people getting the relief they need. Just send out the checks. And if someone has been working during this pandemic and didn't actually need it, then take care of it when they file their taxes. Make sure they pay that money back to the federal government when they file their taxes. Done. But right now, people need relief. People are desperate. And we're having these ridiculous conversations about like, oh, it costs too much money, deficit spending. Again, I mean, it's just a double standard depending on who we're talking about, right? Like if we're talking about the banks and liquidity and making sure they have cash that they can loan out, we're gonna go ahead and pump the banks with as much money as possible. When it comes to corporations, the Federal Reserve decided to do the same with corporations as well during this pandemic. And what did they do? I mean, we're seeing it reflected in the stock market right now. It was just reported today that the country lost 140,000 jobs over the last week. You look at the stock market is buzzing. They're doing real well. Okay, and that disconnect is because of the financial policies that are implemented by the Federal Reserve and our members of Congress. We're gonna have a fantastic post-game show today, so if you're a member, definitely don't miss it. We're gonna give you guys an update on the story of the woman who literally physically assaulted a 14-year-old a black kid, basically teenager, in a hotel lobby. She falsely accused him of stealing her phone. The update to that story is out of control. You can become a member by going to tyt.com/join. I know you guys are gonna enjoy it, and I'm gonna leave you with a member comment since we have time. Brett Ehrlich Superfan says, I love how the mainstream media is finally calling out all of the Republicans that enabled Trump and are calling them to resign or be voted out of office. Little late, but I agree. I do love to see it. At least it's better than nothing. Post game next, see you there.